I met Alex through a common friend and had a very entertaining chat with him. He's a coffee expert and founder of The Coffee Vine and Fresh Drip. You can see the links below. He has started almost 10 years ago and keeps exploring as coffee keeps evolving. And as jobs keep evolving too, he has found a good title for himself, Chief Coffee Officer. So Alex, thank you for accepting my invitation, and let's delve straight into the heart of your job. What does a Chief Coffee Officer do?
Phew, what don't I do? I mean, part of being a founder, I think, is, the attraction is that you get to do so many different things out of necessity, partially, and also because you have the freedom to choose your own activities. I'm sure there are plenty of other people who work in employment who have similar freedoms, but, as a founder, I feel like, everything I do contributes in some way or another towards my business. And some things are not fun, like, doing administration. Sometimes I have to do, sort of quite complicated customer service requests, things like that. But generally speaking, most of the time, what I focus on is growing my business. I have two brands. The Coffee Vine is Europe's leading specialty coffee subscription service and a very much business to consumer focused brand, whereas Fresh Drip is a B2B brand, which is focused on supplying hotels and retailers with innovative instant coffee drippers that allow anyone to brew fresh coffee on the go or wherever you are. You just need hot water and a mug. So they're two very different propositions that also require very different activities and skills. Coffee Vine is much more about creating an experience, telling stories, spending time interviewing the roasters that I work with. So rather than creating a podcast, I actually do a written interview with each of them because I feel, that in some way, a lot of people are not very good, especially if they're not native English speakers. They don't feel comfortable speaking live or, in sort of back in the day, I used to do Instagram lives. They were not always successful. In a written interview, I can give, everyone a kind of nice spin and make them sound interesting, even if they're not. The majority of my time is really dedicated to growing my business, learning something new, finding the right partners to delegate activities to that I find too cumbersome or that I just don't have the time for, and really focusing on, building a successful business that will last, the test of time.
Right. So this passion for coffee, where did it start and when did it start?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a, it almost feels almost mystical, to me. I've always been a coffee drinker since I can remember, when my father used to have a condo in the United States. He's a big golf fan. So we used to, as children, sometimes get dragged to North Carolina with him, where he used to play golf while we were playing in the pool or whatever. But basically, he used to love going to Starbucks and getting these huge venti lattes with cinnamon sprinkles. And I think that's kind of where I discovered coffee. Of course, that coffee is not at all comparable to what I drink today. But I think it kind of set me on a path. Then as a student, and of course I drank a lot of instant coffee. And I think over time, I kind of discovered specialty coffee during business trips to London. When I was working at British American Tobacco, I used to spend quite a bit of time at the HQ there. And, East London was starting to become a bit of a coffee mecca, and I sometimes had time to kill before my flight back to Amsterdam. And I remember one time being in London at it's not really a big cafe anymore, but they used to have a roastery there, All Press in East London in Shoreditch. And I just spent a lot of time there one day and just tasted a lot of different coffees. And I was so fascinated by the different flavors and, just the fact that coffee could be such a different thing to what I was used to. And when I got back to Amsterdam, I combined two passions. One, which I've always loved doing, which was writing. I used to always write articles about my travels for my student newspaper when I was studying in the UK. And I even had a bit of a travel blog for a while. And when I discovered specialty coffee, I thought, why is nobody talking about this? Why is nobody sharing stories about these cafes, these roasters? Maybe I could do that. So that's how the Coffee Vine actually got started as a blog. And the name, a lot of people sometimes say, oh, is this related to coffee and wine? Do you love wine? It's not actually related to wine at all. It's a sort of word play on, I heard it on the grapevine. I heard it on the coffee vine because it was all about sharing new cafes that had just opened, sharing stories about roasters. And it was more of a kind of like a, place to find out where to go and get good coffee.
Awesome. So do you choose your roasters? What's your role for the coffee delivery, let's say, to your customers?
I do a monthly so-called cupping, which is a coffee tasting basically. I invite roasters that I want to work with, or sometimes, I have roasters who say, hey, I'd love to work with you. Can I send you some samples? I try to plan as far ahead as possible because I want to give roasters an opportunity to plan ahead. My orders are quite significant, so they really need to be, prepared. They need to have a good, suitable coffee available. Of course, everything is very seasonal in specialty coffee. There are different harvest times for different origins. And of course, we want to have the freshest, most delicious coffees possible. So I do have a sort of wish list of roasters I want to work with. These mostly include reputable, award-winning roasters from around Europe, sometimes new ones that are just getting started, sometimes, roasters that are already well established. They send me their samples, and then I usually organize this cupping together with some industry friends and coffee professionals in Amsterdam, where we taste all of these coffees blind, as it were, where the samples are basically just provided on the table without the bags so that people don't know what coffees they're tasting. I've recently done quite a few of these in different cities, sometimes as public events where people are invited to just come along and join.
Okay.
Next week, for instance, I'm doing one in Hamburg on the 8th of December, which is my hometown. And I'm inviting members of the public, maybe Coffee Vine subscribers, to join and, yeah, be part of this experience where I basically rate, taste, and then last but not least, choose the coffees that I want to feature in my upcoming Coffee Vine box. And obviously having several people there to taste with me gives me more perspectives and some feedback, maybe some comments that I didn't notice. And usually it's a very, very fun process because I get to taste an incredible array of coffees from around the world, and sometimes really good ones, sometimes not so good ones. But this is very important because it allows me to make sure that the quality always stays very high.
Is coffee a personal taste? Like, how do you know that this coffee that you like will be something that the majority of your customers will like?
Yeah, that's always very tricky because your coffee is super subjective. It's like any other thing, there's no one size fits all. But I think, first of all, I think over the years, I have been able to build up a very, very solid reputation as somebody who really cares about quality, who really goes after the best roasters and, really chooses the best coffees. So there won't be any mediocre crap in there.
Okay.
And the other thing I think that is important is that people build a relationship with the coffee vine because of me, I think. I play a very central role in all of the communication. I'm very visible as a founder. I'm very visible as the person behind the brand because I believe that people sign up to the coffee vine as much as they sign up to me. And if I can give my personal guarantee that I'm choosing these coffees carefully and that they are the best tasting coffees, then people will say, hey, you know what? If he likes the coffees, then I will like them.
Okay.
But it's always a risk. There are
A
sometimes
risk,
coffees
yeah.
that people say, oh, I really didn't like this one, or this one was terrible. But it's very subjective. You never know how people are going to end up brewing them, what kind of water quality they're using, which brew method, which recipe. There are so many variables.
How long have you been doing this job?
Well, actually, I founded the Coffee Vine as a blog in 2012, and I officially
Okay.
registered the company in 2013. So next year will be the 10-year anniversary. But
Oh,
we actually
fantastic.
only shipped out our first box in June of 2014. So still a while to go.
Okay, no, that's awesome. So before then, were you at the British American Tobacco?
Yes. So I
Okay.
studied in the UK at Lancaster University, where I did initially a marketing and economics joint major, but I dropped economics after a few months because I really hated the subject.
Okay.
And I'm a quite,
Thanks for being
I'm a very
honest.
sort of, yeah, no, I had to
That's
take, well, I
good.
took it at school,
Please. Yeah.
and it's not that it doesn't interest me. I'm quite well read, and I follow, I read The Economist, etc. So I do keep up on this sort of stuff, but it's not something that I see myself doing as a professional. And I realized that, why should I waste all this time studying something that I don't like? So
Right.
basically, I left economics behind and focused entirely on marketing. And I really love that because it allowed me to be creative, which is something that I love doing, working with brands, working with communication. That's something that I really enjoy. So I did that. And then afterwards, I took a year off, a gap year, went traveling for 6 months, worked in a call center.
Okay.
But I got recruited by a recruitment agency into a really cool management trainee program in marketing at British American Tobacco, which was in Amsterdam.
I
And I
see.
didn't have Amsterdam on my schedule or on my radar at all. I didn't like Amsterdam, actually. I wanted to go back to the UK. I almost got a similar job at Citigroup, but I couldn't go to the last interview because I was already in India. So, and at the time there was no such thing as Zoom, and it makes me sound ancient, but it just wasn't there, and they were not willing to
Right.
do interviews over the phone. So I had to basically skip that opportunity, even though I had gone to all the assessment centers and interviews, and it was maybe the right thing that had to happen because I've been in Amsterdam for 15 years already, and I love this place.
Ah, wow. You see, life happens while you're making other
Yeah,
plans. Uh,
exactly.
Awesome. And so the trigger point for you, from, working at a company, doing marketing or
hmm
management into then shifting into becoming an entrepreneur
hmm
and dealing with coffee. What was the trigger?
The trigger was I got fired.
Okay,
Very
that's a
simply
good
put.
trigger.
So I got fired 3 times in a row.
Okay.
The thing is, I was very good at my job at British American Tobacco. My colleagues loved me and my creativity, but just didn't get along with my superiors. I think it was because I had just an issue with authority, and maybe I just wasn't the right fit for a corporate structure that was very rigid. My creativity, helped me to do some amazing projects while I was there, especially while I was working as brand executive for the brand Kent, which was my responsibility for a year and a half. But I don't think I really fit into that culture. The next 2 jobs I did were at startups. One was Groupon, which at the time was, hailed
Mm,
as the new
yes.
Amazon.
Yeah.
And the next job after that was at a similar company, which was a competitor who poached me, and I gave me a promotion. But the problem was that neither of these companies, I felt like I was really living up to my potential. I wasn't really doing something I really enjoyed. Groupon was super flat. There was basically like, one COO and like 20 middle managers reporting to him. So there was no way that I could ever have
Mm,
gotten a promotion unless I had, moved away from Amsterdam, which I didn't want.
right.
And at the second one, which was called Sweet Deal, it was owned by a really old publishing house that didn't believe in digital basically, and part of the reason why they're dying. But they
Mm,
also moved the office away from Amsterdam, so I suddenly had to commute an hour and a half each way to this place near Utrecht, and I just hated the company. I hated being there. And it was during that time that I discovered specialty coffee, that I started writing my blog. So I was basically working there, but I was not working there, if you know what I mean. And
I
when they
see.
said,
Yeah.
we're not going to renew your contract, I was like, great, this is the best news ever. Because I could
Thanks a
basically
lot.
take this opportunity to focus on building my business. And it kind of gave me a kick in the butt to kind of
Yeah.
get this started.
To do it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly what can happen to to boost and make you do what you like to do, which is great.
Definitely.
And so now, from what you learned at school, university, and then from what you did before your company, are you using some of those skills? Do you find them useful, despite the fact that then you've changed? But have you been
Well,
able to reuse the knowledge that you've built over the years?
I don't think my university education is very useful to me. at all, to be honest, because the marketing that I
The
studied,
marketing.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
almost 20
Has
years ago,
changed.
is has changed. It's not the same. Facebook. I remember signing up for for my Facebook account while I was at university, and it was this new thing that people were talking about. I mean, there was no such thing as Instagram. There was no such thing as, Google advertising wasn't a thing. So a lot of the things that I do today for my own business, which is content creation, running, influencer campaigns or things like that, that was just not a thing then. And of course, while I was working in tobacco, which is a so-called dark industry where marketing or advertising in the Netherlands anyway is super restricted, and today even more so than back then when I was there, I had to think very much out of the box, and it was very much B2B driven, So that's actually quite interesting because a lot of the things that I'm doing today, are for Fresh Drip, it's very much B2B, like sales, whereas for Coffee Vine, it's very much B2C marketing. But I'm learning constantly new things, constantly thinking about how can I improve the product that I sell, but also how can I improve the experience? How can I create more value? How can I create, a better reputation for my brand? How can I create more brand awareness? And as a small company, that's sometimes quite tricky because you have a limited budget. You can't do everything at once. You're really trying to kind of get the most out of every penny that you spend. At the same time, you're not necessarily an expert on running, campaigns. So you have to really look at how you can get more value, out of every platform. For instance, one thing that I recently discovered, which I think is really amazing, is LinkedIn advertising. Something I never thought of, especially for Fresh Drip, which is amazing. I can reach all of these people, and I'm going to sound like I'm advertising for them, but no, it's my personal experience. I can reach all of these hotel managers, food and beverage managers that I would have to otherwise try to call or email. I can reach them through LinkedIn and create leads. And LinkedIn has been great. They actually provided me with a coach to help me set up my campaigns. We monitored them every 2 weeks for free.
Oh,
And it's
awesome.
amazing,
Really?
So
Wow.
these are things that I'm learning as I go. And this is stuff that, it's not in a textbook per se. Maybe today it is, I don't know, but it wasn't for me.
Now, when you were studying or I was studying, I also did
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah.
But
It's a very
yeah,
different world today.
it is, yeah. For someone who is, even younger, and is finishing studies, let's say between 18 and 25, either going, decided to go to university or maybe not. What kind of jobs are there that around the world of coffee that you could recommend today? Now that you're in this business for 10 years.
I mean, look, coffee is such an interesting industry, and there are very, very different types of coffee brands. You can think of big multinationals like Nespresso, Starbucks, Douwe Egberts, all these huge multinationals. They can offer you a proper corporate education if that's what you're after. I would not necessarily say that their coffee is particularly good, but for instance, Nespresso, when it comes to branding, is the non plus ultra. They
Right.
created something that is the product is actually not great, but it's the whole aspiration of it. The whole idea of going to these boutiques on the most expensive streets in town and buying coffee that makes
Meeting
you feel like
George
you're George
Clooney.
Clooney. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how it is. Starbucks, it's about convenience and consistency. Starbucks is the McDonald's of coffee. You go to a Starbucks in the Netherlands or in the UK and you'll get the same thing. But if you're looking for something that is exciting and different, then of course, you should look at small roasters, for example, or cafes, or, coffee importing in businesses. They're also really interesting because they work with the producers. You really get to deal with all of these, spectacular places where coffee is grown, going on origin trips, which is super interesting for many people. I've been to two origins, to two coffee farms in Panama and in Mexico. And or you're, if you have the ambition to be a barista and compete in the various competitions that are there, that's also something that is super exciting. It's not personally for
No.
me, but, there are people out there who live for competitions and they're terribly good at it.
Right. Are there any myths around your job?
Everybody in the beginning used to say, because I was one of the only, I think, entrepreneurs in my group of friends, they used to say, wow, it's so amazing that you're doing this and, good on you and blah, blah, blah. And I always got this sort of idea that people thought this is such an amazing lifestyle, and fair enough. I do have the freedom to go to places that I want to go to whenever I want to go. I have the freedom to work my own hours. I can go to the gym in the morning without having to worry, oh, what is my boss going to think about my late arrival today or whatever. But, the truth is that as an entrepreneur, you are basically responsible for your own future. There's no one else who's going to say to you, here's your career plan for the next 5 years. That's just not
Right.
there. You need to make that career plan yourself. You need to ensure that your business is successful and flourishing. If you are not committed, if you don't put in the hours, you can basically, shut your shop down and go home, because it's very rare that your business will just take off without you putting in any effort. And I think a lot of people kind of had this idea that it's like, you're living like the Richard Branson lifestyle and you're doing all these amazing things. But, all of these things that I'm doing are the consequence of my hard work, which sometimes means working 7 days a week, sometimes working until late at night, you know. I mean, it's just a different lifestyle. I don't have a 9 to 5. And I don't want that, actually, because if I had a 9 to 5, I think, my work would be very, very different. I don't think I would be able to maybe grow as much as I do. And I don't think it's suitable for me personally, for my personality.
I see. And in terms of lessons you've learned from, you've done this now for almost 10 years next year. And what have you learned today that you wished you had known when you started?
Oof, I could write a book about that. I mean, honestly, the life lessons are the gift that keeps on giving. I think for me, one of the biggest lessons has been to put my own pride and my own idea that I know better at the bottom of my priorities. I learned so many times already that, by not listening to what people are telling you, you can make very costly mistakes that can almost ruin you. I learned, to listen to people, to be open to feedback. That's so crucial, to be able to say, you know what, that's a really great idea. Or just, if somebody says to you, I love what you do, but have you considered doing this? Or even if somebody provides you with feedback, through a review, or they send you an email, say, I really love your coffee, but I think the product is boring, or whatever. That hurts, but you need to listen to that. You need to be able to accept feedback in order to get better. My grandmother always used to say, and I loved her, she was a Mexican woman who was one of the first plastic surgeons in her state and one of the first in Mexico, female plastic surgeons.
Fantastic.
And she always used to say to people, if you don't complain, you will never give them a chance to get better. Of course, the complaint has to be reasonable, but if you don't tell people how to get better, they will never learn. And I think for me, having been very much stuck in my own ways, sometimes being very stubborn, and also working alone for a long time, it was sometimes very difficult to have another perspective on the table, and to actually say, oh, what if I did this, or what if I did that, or what do you think about what I'm doing, And now I've been in a relationship for 4 years now. My partner is amazing, and I always ask him for his feedback, and I always say to him, hey, what do you think about this? Like, the other day I was working on a survey for the end of year. I said, hey, can you take a look at this? And he was like, we need to talk about this. I was like, oh no. Okay, let's talk about it. But
Here it comes.
this is it's so important. As an entrepreneur, you often have this idea that your vision or your idea or your product is the best thing out there. But you know what? Probably it's not. So be open to people giving you constructive feedback, because it could be a matter of life and death.
Excellent. And so now, if I look at other skills, because being open it's very important. In your experience, like what other kind of skills, be it soft skills or hard skills, do you think that your kind of your line of work should really comprise?
I mean, one of the key things is relationships. It's everything. I could have no skills whatsoever in everything else as long as I have relationship skills. It's really the ultimate thing. Over the years, of course, the coffee vine, especially the coffee vine, built such a community around the world. People I mean, I'm not even joking. It still surprises me when it happens. But last year I was in Paris at a coffee event, and I was walking around the streets with my friend, and people recognized me on the street twice. They come up to me and
Wow.
said, "You're Alex from the Coffee Vine, right?" And I said, "Oh my God, yes. And who are you?" And this is because I built relationships.
Yeah.
People know me, they trust me. With my roasters, I can call up any of my roasters and say, "Hey, I need some coffee. What do you have?" And they're like, "What do you need? I'll send it to you tomorrow." If I were some nondescript internet company that didn't have a face, that nobody knew, they would say, "Sorry, who are you again?" And with me, it's different. People look to me as somebody they trust, somebody that they know will deal, will treat their product with the highest possible respect. And that takes time. And that's something I also do in my personal life. I have my best friends are priceless to me. I'm very good at building relationships with other people in my social circle because I want, to give this impression that I'm, a reliable, trustworthy person that people love to have around, and
Yeah.
I think that's super important. If you're not good at relationship building and you're trying to build a brand, you need to work on that because it's going to be very crucial for you.
And what's next for you?
So I've always, since being a child, I've always loved being on stage. I've always loved being in front of the camera. I'm very comfortable on stage. I'm comfortable entertaining people. I have been working for 2 years now with my best friend Maxine. We've been hosting a sort of comedy house quiz at Soho House. And this has become a huge hit. And we do it quarterly. So not regularly, but to keep it kind of interesting, we do it quarterly. It's also a lot of work, but it's so much
Yeah.
fun. We have hundreds of people attending every edition. And I've recently pitched to the organizers of the coffee festivals that I want to host a coffee quiz at the Amsterdam, Paris, and Milan editions. They accepted my proposal and they are so excited because they say that it's something, I think this is something that the festivals urgently need, a fun, entertaining aspect that is not just all about doing business and competitions. It's also something about bringing people together, which is what I love. And
Yeah.
so starting in 2023, I'm going to be hosting my comedy quiz at the coffee festivals. I'm also working on a documentary
Wow.
together with a production agency from the UK. And I think next year, after 2 years of Corona and 2 years of misery for Fresh Drip in particular, not for Coffee Vine. Coffee Vine did great, but Fresh Drip did not. I want to take the business to the next level and possibly by the end of next year, start pitching for investment.
Awesome. Super.
Yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
you really all the best of success for you. And I'm sure, I mean, I can hear how determined you are and how passionate you are. So it
Yeah.
is
Thanks.
definitely going to work.
I hope so. You never know. There
You
could be
never
another
know.
pandemic around the corner, but
Yeah.
I
No.
I learned a lot during the last 2 years, and and nothing can bring me down. I can tell you that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being my
That's my
guest. And
pleasure.
I look forward to seeing you again and to have you as my guest maybe 5 years from now, and we're gonna see documentaries done, quizzes, and
Yeah, who
new
knows?
companies. You'll be worldwide, and it will be very, very
I would
nice.
love that. I would love that.
Passion and determination, two ingredients that keep Alex going and his coffee business growing. If you want to hear more about coffee professionals, check out episode 60 of Job Tales that was dedicated to the profession of a barista. As Alex wrote in his bio, you're as only good as your last brew. And on that note, I'll take my morning coffee and will bid you goodbye and wish you plenty of satisfaction for your day ahead.